My name is Senator Ray Scott. My Senate district is number 7 in Mesa County, Colorado.
Thank you for joining the program here today, and wanted to bring you in for a couple reasons. One is to talk about Weld County and the succession to Wyoming headlines I've been seeing pop up, and the second one is to get your thoughts on kind of how the Green New Deal and I call it the mad green rush is what I call it now, to do this renewable thing. I really felt like it was tested this last week as America experienced a cold down in Texas, especially. So we'll get Senator Scott's opinions on that. But how you doing today out in Grand Junction area? Right, that's where you're kind of at.
Yeah, that's my district, and yeah, we're doing great out here.
Okay, and you guys are big natural gas out there, right?
Yeah, we're predominantly 100% natural gas. We have very little oil west of the Continental Divide. So our whole basin, the Piceance Basin, is natural gas. That's what we produce over here.
And how much of your district would be impacted by executive order federal leases with Joe Biden? Have you looked at that yet? Kind of pop question, I know. But I thought as long as we're talking, hey.
Well, it's a huge problem for us because we're about 76% federal land. So it's going to have a major impact on new permitting for anything on federal land. So yeah, we're kind of bracing for impact, which is unfortunate, but it's what we're stuck with right now.
We had Mark Gordon, governor of Wyoming, on the program last week, and one of the questions we actually had written down was about the Weld County succession, because I saw it pop up in the USA Today about 3-4 weeks ago. I didn't pay much attention to it, to be honest, because I down in Texas, they have weekly meetings about it. Oklahoma monthly, that's how it goes.
Sure.
And then, but the question we did ask him, which actually seems crazy now because the Weld County succession thing is back in the news again. But we actually asked him, because the amount of governors that were suing the president, if they could do a class action lawsuit against the president based on this executive orders, because that was where our logic went. If that so many governors are starting to sue the president, I mean, boy, class action's next. So we ended up asking him that question instead of the succession into Wyoming. So we thought we'd bring you on to talk a little bit about the succession to Wyoming. If you want to comment about the class action lawsuit, you can too, but that's just that's speculation stuff and a little bit ridiculous. But at the same time, I really thought the Weld County thing was ridiculous too, but I see it's back in the news again. So, Senator Ray Scott from Colorado, what's going on with that Weld County succession talk?
Well, number one, being from Mesa County, we're a little bit jealous, right? Because we kind of like to go to Utah or someplace else if we could. But obviously we all understand, that's a very, very high bar to ever be able to cross. But it does kind of excite the troops a little bit, if you will, the constituents out there. There might be some hope out there. I think the biggest problem with that is, how would you like to be the governor of a state where counties are trying to flee from your state? I mean, that's embarrassing, right? I mean, it's like it just speaks volumes about how terrible he's treating these different counties around the state of Colorado. So from the embarrassment level nationally, I'm sure there's going to be some blowback on him about that. I mean, he's doing his State of the State address today at 11 a.m., and I doubt seriously he's going to talk about that. But, it's one of those things where it shows you the attitude of the voters, and they're very upset. Weld County does not have a bunch of public land in it, so they don't have to necessarily worry about executive orders. But the impacts that we've dealt with over the last couple of years, from exactly what you mentioned at the beginning of your program, was this push towards what they want to call, I call them unreliable energy. I don't call it renewable energy because it is unreliable, and we just saw that happen in Texas. So there's the crushing blow that not only our governor has had on Colorado with what we called Senate Bill 181, and then you have the federal government coming after you as well, all to push a green energy agenda which we're now finding out, you know what? Guess what? It's not as special as people might want to think it is.
Talk about the teachable moment in just a second about the test that the renewable energy grid had, especially down in Texas. But, I'll ask you a question I asked Senator Kramer, U.S. Senator Kramer, which was, when you've got the President of the United States coming out and saying, go build wind turbines, and then they appoint John Kerry at this, I still don't know what a climate envoy or envoy is. I don't even know how to pronounce it correctly. That's how out to lunch I am on that whole thing. And then there's a climate Caesar on top of it. So you got a Caesar salad and an envoy. It's just unbelievable. But, well, it's a little bit scary because at the end of the day, that can really dictate every single part of our life. So people should not take their eye off of that slowly growing department of overreach, but that's a different topic for a different day. But for me, what I'm looking at here is that when you've got these, they call the president, the leader of the free world. And when he's telling people, TS, go back, but like kind of back when Clinton told people, the coal miners, stop mining coal and start coding again. And now they're saying stop doing fossil fuels and go build renewables. To me, it just smacks of rank prejudice. And you're from Colorado, so I think you're kind of in the lion's den of what's known as rank prejudice. But just kind of your thoughts on that, because I just, Senator Kramer had some comments on it, and I'd like to hear yours.
Well, it's one of those things that we've been dealing with for several years. Even though President Trump was doing a great job of making us energy independent, we still had problems within certain states, and Colorado was one of those states. And yes, I believe in sovereignty of the states and the 10th Amendment and all those things. But the overreach, in our case, on federal lands was still in place for almost the entire 4 years of President Trump's term. And we tried different things to try to get that pressure off of our federal lands so that we could do more energy production. But as you know, there's kind of a glut of natural gas worldwide, and there were some other issues with cost of doing that. But the overreaching problem we have now is we have a president that is very, very clear that he is anti-fossil fuel. He obviously wouldn't say that during the campaign, but right at the end, he finally let it slip that, he was going to eliminate fossil fuel. So that's the path we're on. And then to have somebody like John Kerry, who, obviously is a political hack, we know that. Yes, he will have impacts on all types of production and energy and all the things we're worried about. But I think you also know this too, and I'm sure Senator Kramer would agree that it's not so much sometimes the president that's running the show. It's all the different agencies that he puts his people into. So people in the EPA, people in natural resources, those folks will be the ones that help keep the president's fingers clean, and they will go out and they will institute some very erroneous restrictions on what we can and we can't do nationwide. And we've seen that here in Colorado. Governor Polis has been very crafty at how he's done this. But he's from the Obama administration. Basically, that's when he served in Congress. And he learned very well that you have your agencies do the dirty work. And then you can stand back and say, well, my fingerprints are on it. And I think that's where we're at now. Unfortunately, to your point about the governors filing lawsuits, that's exactly what's going to have to take place. This will have to be settled in the courts. And if nothing else, hopefully that puts a stop to them going forward with any crazy plans that they might have. But of course, it's going to cost millions and millions of dollars and a lot of energy. And by the time they settle something in the lawsuits, hopefully Joe Biden is gone. He's no longer the president. So we're in a crazy time here on multiple levels, and that just, the idea of John Kerry of having any idea of what to do with energy is just absurd.
My understanding is Senator Kramer said he's got the largest fossil fuel footprint of any of the senators. So ironically, he's the one in charge of it now. It's just great. I mean, you just can't make it up. I do want to ask you about, Texas is kind of under the spotlight right now, and they should be. And I've said this on my podcast for the last few days and on the radio show that photograph of the helicopter de-icing the wind turbine is probably the best piece of public relations to come out of the oil and gas industry in 10 years. It's unbelievable because a picture shows a million words there that just says it all. That at the end of the day, do you want everyday energy? And if you do, well, you need a helicopter that's got to de-ice your platitude world. So I look at what happened down in Texas as a tragedy, but at the same time, it was the first real test for renewable energy because Texas has got a big portion of their grid now devoted to renewable energy, and they were not prepared at all. New York, New England, just talked to the guys at Cabot Oil, fourth largest natural gas company in the United States. They're paying 5-6 times the amount in New England than they are in Pennsylvania because of the political whatever the governor put, how he wants foreign energy imported in rather than stuff from Pennsylvania. You can't make it up. Again, it's really, really remarkable. But talk to me about whether you think the renewable, the whole movement passed or failed down in Texas.
Well, obviously they get a grade of an F, the total failure on their part. And I kind of go back to a conversation I had with Secretary Perry up in a conference we were at in Salt Lake City a couple of years ago, and Governor Herbert was there also from Utah. And we were having this little chat about Texas in general. And Secretary Perry was telling us, and it was fascinating, he was telling us a story about their nuclear power plants. And what was happening at that time in Texas is they were producing so much power, and they had shifted their grid around so much that the nuclear, which is obviously the cleanest form of producing energy, was literally having to sell the power below their cost to even keep it on the grid. And he even said back then, a couple of years ago, that they were so far out of balance in Texas that they were heading for some type of a disaster. Who knew it was going to be a snowstorm in Texas? But here we are. And again, I think it points so much to the unreliable nature of solar and wind. I don't know about you, but I don't think I'd want to be in a hospital in Dallas, Texas on life support and know that wind energy is going to be my source of keeping that machine running, right? A little scary at the least. But, and I think the other thing it points to is these folks within that unreliable sector that have said, oh, well, we wanted all of the above energies. Obviously that's not true at all. They don't. They do believe that we can just have 100%. The other interesting fact too is the battery storage that they're touting that they're coming up with. Well, I read something the other day where the entire United States could only last something like 14 minutes on the storage that's available today. That's it. So 14 minutes you can't get to your car quick enough to get out of the house, right? So they are so far behind the curve on getting this storage, the battery storage, in place to even be able to handle the most minute degree of storage for a case like what happened in Texas. And now there's going to be a spotlight on that.
That is remarkable because about a decade ago, I read that we had a half hour of storage, so we've lost 15 minutes in the last 10 years, which makes sense because we've added a lot to the grid.
Exactly.
Everything now is powered from our bikes to whatever, and so it's that was an eye opener to me because I've been hearing about the terawatt of storage for 10 years, and I've heard Chicago, for example, they've only got a few hours of energy storage, and some other cities and things like that, and so it's interesting. 14 minutes, which I totally believe. But just to give the people an idea out there, 10 years ago, it was a half hour. So
exactly. It's going the wrong direction.
Totally. Just kind of to end the interview, and thank you, Senator Ray Scott, for your time. Sure. What should people do over the next 60 days, 30 days, along those things? Because really, there's a great opportunity right now for some very civil-minded, rational emails and just discussions and that sort of thing. Very easy to finger point and shame and say, see, I told you so. But at the same time, right now might be a good time to email your senators or something like that and say, Texas is a good example why we should be having a different talk here, people. I mean, I don't know what do you recommend in a time like this when everything seems to be the right and wrong answer?
Well, and I agree with what you're saying is they need to contact their federal representatives as quickly as possible and state representatives as well in different states, because we are under mandates in Colorado, just like in a lot of other states, to be 100% basically unreliable energy by 2030. And that's just not even realistic. It doesn't even make sense. But I think now it's been exposed in a different light, where people that have truly believed that this is the answer, especially if you're a Texan right now, you're finding out the hard way it's not the answer. If we're truly going to have an all of the above energy portfolio, which I believe in, I don't, solar's got a place at the table, wind's got a place at the table, but the people that want to push fossil fuel completely off the table have now learned a very valuable lesson. And I think this is going to resonate, and I think, people's minds are going to change. There's nothing more, I can't even imagine being in some place where you have no heat for 48 hours or a week or, any of those situations. That's a massive wake-up call, a massive wake-up call. We need to heed that warning. But listen, yes, sure, wind and solar has a place at the table, but let's measure this stuff and let's be smarter about how we implement and what we depend on. We have to have a smarter system. And I think as I said, we've learned a valuable lesson. And if you have relatives in Texas, give them a call and ask them how they're feeling today.